Well, howdy, folks. Welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, where I will be having a great conversation with David Rothkopf coming up real quick. Sorry I'm a little late this morning. He actually had to reschedule. I couldn't get another guest, which I usually can, but I was spending the afternoon with Julia celebrating her birthday and teaching her to drive because she did, in fact, pass her driver's permit test. Then I hosted last night's GOP Clown Car Screamfest Extravaganza hangout for subscribers. And I do plan to host a hangout tonight. I'm going to set it for 9 p.m. If I can get there earlier, I will, but I'm going to be doing a talk tonight in New Hampshire, so I'll be hosting the hangout from a hotel room. And hopefully I'll get there. Maybe I'll get there by 8 and be able to start it by 8. But right now, just to be safe, I'm going to say 9 p.m. tonight. Hang out with me. If you're a subscriber, we always have a great time. Thursday nights, I'll be in a hotel. Should be fun. I don't know why it'll be more fun. It'll be less fun that I'm in a hotel. Anyway, let's get to today's guest so I can get on the road and listen to it with you. Rothkopf is quickly becoming one of your favorite guests, as certainly has become one of mine. He is the host of Deep State Radio, which is an awesome media platform. They have several different podcasts you should go listen to, check out. Great expert on that program. He's also, of course, a contributor at The Daily Beast. We'll talk with him today about a few of his recent columns. He's been writing about foreign policy, as he often does. His last piece, however, is titled Ask GOP Debaters If They Support Trump's Open Fascism, which I really enjoyed. So we'll talk a little bit about the debate, the campaign, foreign policy, and more. Always great when he joins me. I hope that you're following him on all the social media. I hope that you bought his book, American Resistance, The Inside Story of How the Deep State Saved the Nation. And let him know that you heard him here, and I hope that you're supporting this show with a paid subscription, with a review on one of the major podcast players. Follow me now on youtube.com/standupwithpete. And today I'm promoting Threads. I'm putting things out. I'm posting on Threads quite a bit. So you got to do them all. TikTok as well, Pete.Dominic. Get it going. Follow him up. Thank you very much. David Rothkopf. Let's do it. All right. I've got him now. David Rothkopf, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me yet once again. You keep coming back, and we're all so grateful. You've become a real star here.
Well, you're really very kind to invite me back, and I know that I'm just a last-minute filler for the person you really wanted. Who was that, by the way? Who did you really want in this slot?
Honestly, I'll tell you who exactly it was. It was you yesterday at this time. I mean, threw off the entire booking and schedule of the show.
I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry, but...
It's actually not a problem at all. Like, it happens, every once in a while people can't do it, obviously. And usually what I'll do is I'll call somebody up and we'll find someone last second, or I have something in the tank. In this case, yesterday, Julia, my daughter, turned 16. So I took the second half of the day off. I was like, no worries. I'll talk to David tomorrow and I'll celebrate with my daughter today. And I think as a father of successful daughters, you would agree with that choice.
Well, yes. First of all, happy birthday to Julia. And secondly, I do agree with that choice. And thirdly, with regard to the one successful daughter I have, the older of the two successful and wonderful daughters, she went back to work yesterday because the WGA strike was over. Isn't that great news, Pete?
I have my notes because, of course, your daughter works on Last Week Tonight. She's a writer there, and I am the fluffer. And so we're both going back to work. This Sunday, we're taping a new episode. But your thoughts on that, having obviously your daughter be, part of the guild, a union member, and your thoughts on that. And I also wanted to get your thoughts on UAW. But it seems to be, from everything I've read, in terms of the agreement here, the WGA got really won big. Your thoughts? What are you hearing?
Totally agree with you. First of all, both of my daughters were affected by this because the other daughter is married to a guy who writes for Colbert. So right. Both families were struggling with this for 146 days or whatever it was. And I was struck by the solidarity of the union throughout all of this. I was struck by the fact that a number of the issues that they were raising were really pioneering issues in the history of negotiations, because they had to do with things like AI and do things that are written by AI get credit? Can AI replace a writer and so forth? Somebody had to go and deal with that, and they did, and they stood firm. And the collection of assholes who run the big movie and TV companies, streaming companies, are really sort of as odious and almost cartoonishly evil as we have ever seen. There's kind of like, when you're growing up and you watch a cartoon and there are a bunch of guys in a back room with big cigars and, sort of cackling and, sort of diving into piles of money. And that's exactly what these guys are. They're paying themselves hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they're not willing to give the table leavings to the people who actually create the content off of which they're profiting. So I was super glad to see that. And if you will indulge me for 30 seconds more, I think it's very interesting. When I was in the Clinton administration, which was, as you know, about a century ago, the conversation was unions are dead. That's over in this country.
Yeah.
It was 12%, then it was 11%. They're just a falling fraction of the workforce. That's not what the conversation is now. You have the WGA, you have SAG-AFTRA, you have the UAW, you have the workers in Las Vegas who are about to go on to strike. You have many media companies. When I was running foreign policy, the workforce there went on strike. You have many media companies doing this, and polls show the Gen Z are super supportive of unions. And the reason is that the exploitative nature of American capitalism, the inequality in the United States has grown worse and worse. And as they look into the future, and they see a future with new technologies changing the equation, it's absolutely clear it's going to get worse and worse. And the only way that the average person is going to have any leverage over the increasingly super empowered billionaires that own and run the companies is collectively. And the interesting thing is, and I was one of those who underestimated Joe Biden when he was running for office. This president, because he is not a boomer, he's pre-boomer, he comes to it with kind of FDR level values that were, a day and an age when unions still were sort of seen as the foundation of the Democratic Party and of the American middle class. He has sort of led this resurgence. And, this week we saw the president of the United States walking on a picket line.
Yeah, first time ever of a city president. Yeah.
And it was like so heartening. And for those of you who don't think this is a bipartisan kind of conversation, let me offer that it was also a stunning contrast to the administration in which Biden previously served, the Obama administration, which, when the auto unions went on strike, went to the workers and said, swallow hard, you're going to make this happen. And then the people on top, as always happens, survived. The industry recovered. They started making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they never gave anything back. And Biden says, no, you got to give back. This is only fair.
Well, yeah, led by the union saying that first, and then Biden looking at it and go, yeah, they've made so much money. Just one quick tiny correction. You said, I think 7% union membership, and you were referring to, and we've mostly been talking about certainly UGA, like private sector jobs, private sector unions. Of course, the public sector, according to recent BLS data from 22, is about 33%, and that's when we're talking about teachers and others in the public sector. And I think that's a really important distinction to point out why they're needed and the difference between public and private. But the fact that what you're saying, the most important point is that there's a resurgence and this president is on board.
Yeah. I didn't say 7%.
Old president is on board.
Yeah, no. And I didn't say 7%. I said during the Clinton administration, union membership got down to about 11%.
Well, it was, go ahead. Sorry.
But you're absolutely right to make the point about public sector unions. And I just think, there's a bigger issue here, and you will never discuss it on your show because it's the third rail in media discussions, polite society, and politics in the United States. We're going to have to take a break
before you say it, and then I have to censor the show so people don't hear you say it then.
Okay, well, you take your break. But here's the third rail. American capitalism is fucked up. It doesn't work. It gives to the rich. It hurts the poor. It hurts the middle class. It's getting worse. And, in Europe, they get it. They have capitalist societies, but they also have social safety nets.
Yeah.
They spend on things like healthcare and education, but they also have balanced budgets. They have high quality of life, but they also have creativity and all the things we say are unique to our country in terms of new business innovation and so forth. And we've just got to stop every so often and say, is the way we're doing it the right way?
Well,
and I don't think in the United States it is.
We could and should have a robust discussion about what our economy should be, and especially what our future economy should be, given technology, AI, etc. But I'll have you know, sir, how dare you? You're talking to a man who's been platforming anti-capitalists since 2008. I mean, from Chomsky to the ghost of Karl Marx. I mean, I've had everybody here.
The ghost of Karl Marx has actually been on this show.
He called in back in Sirius. Yeah, absolutely.
Did he have a German accent?
I don't recall his accent, because that would prove that it didn't happen. You're really pushing the improv here, and it's falling apart. So I think it's an important point, just to get to last night's.
So my job is to say yes and.
No, your job is to not take it apart. Like, I don't know. Did he have a German accent? Well, I
believed you. I believed that Karl Marx called the show. And honestly, I gave a speech the other day at the Rand Corporation, sort of the bastion, the bulwark of, sort of deep state Washington, D.C. defense establishment.
Yeah.
And it was a speech about AI and where it's going to lead. And I said, now at this point in the speech, you're going to lead me from the room in handcuffs, because I have to tell you, I think the future of American capitalism as it is right now is limited. And I think people are going to start to dust off their Karl Marx, because his comments about the marriage of, capital and technology essentially are warning, not for our past, but for our future.
Yes.
And I was not let out of there in handcuffs, but everybody at that point immediately said, oh, he's a crazy lefty.
Certain economic criticism and ideas seem to be, I don't know much, more applicable at certain times in certain markets. Like, every argument doesn't apply at every time. And with the future of technology and what we've already seen, maybe we can learn something from the classical theorists. But I also think we have to not get stuck on classical economics and create a new kind of economics where, there's, I guess it's not new, but to have universal basic income for certain sectors of our economy, that there just won't be enough jobs and there'll be too many people. That's a conversation I'm always super interested in hearing.
Well, but that's where it's going to go. Because sure. But I got news for you. I think there is a very serious possibility, and I'm writing a book about this right now. There's a very serious possibility that the advent of the age of AI is going to lead to massive labor dislocations.
Yeah.
And unlike past technological revolutions, may not lead to the creation of comparable numbers of new jobs. And so the question is going to be, what do we do? And there are economists who have written about this. Great book by Andy McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson of MIT called The Second Machine Age, came out many years ago, which say, we're going to move to fewer and fewer days of work. And then we're going to have to face a question, which is, how do we enable people to stay alive when there aren't enough jobs for people? And that's where you get to universal basic income. And, I go out and I give speeches about this stuff, and I say, well, this could happen, and so on and so forth. And, the future generations may not have to all go to work for a living. And people just start shaking their heads, and they're like, oh my God, I was saying this to a pretty lefty, big time Democrat the other day. I was like, oh no, that would be terrible, because people's jobs are their identity. And if you don't have a job, you don't have an identity.
It's true.
And I was like, what a load of shit. You have been believing the crap that your masters have been handing out for decades and decades. If you go and sit in a field surrounded by flowers with your 16-year-old daughter and read poetry, that's a better way to lead your life than sitting in a factory, sticking widget A on widget B, or sitting in a law office, filing,
sure.
notices.
Yes, but we fully disagree. And the arrogance with which you delivered that opinion was so noted by me and others, because it can also be true. Of course you name a bunch of shitty jobs. Like if you're a fireman, or you host a show that you love, or you're a teacher, it can be your purpose, and having work be your purpose isn't so controversial. Yet I agree with you on pretty much everything else, but I'll let you.
But no, look, work can be your purpose. But if you are not compensated sufficiently for it, that changes the equation from what the equation was. And, we've been buying this stuff for a long time. In the Middle Ages, your many, ancestors back had, some lord and master who would ride through the fields and with a priest next to him. And it would say, well, your life sucks and you're going to die when you're 33 years old, but you'll be rewarded in heaven.
Right.
And everybody else went, oh, yeah, more pig shit for me. I can't wait till I get to heaven. And it's like, that was bullshit. And the bullshit that, hard day's work is what really makes your life worth living is also bullshit that was promoted because somebody else made money off of you buying that nonsense. Or
the promise today equivalent would be if you work really hard, every day for the next how many years, you'll have a great retirement with health care and,
Well, that's bullshit. There is no such thing.
Of course, but that's what you're...
But retirement isn't going to happen. You're not going to retire.
Believe me, I know. And
you're going to work and then you're going to drop dead. Your forehead's going to hit the microphone. Everybody, people are going to go, what was that? And then, just a dial tone, that'll be the end.
I can't believe my family found me dead, took the podcast and then still posted it. That's really...
And they're just going to push you off the chair and your then 53-year-old daughter is going to go, sorry, my father won't be carrying this forward.
Get the ratings for a guy dying on. Yeah, she knows what to do. Well, let's get back to the debate last night and what you're saying here, because I was outraged at this string of moments when they were talking about economics. At one point, somebody said, I think it was Tim Scott, doesn't matter, we have to restore our capitalism. I pressed pause with all the folks I was watching it with and said, restore our capitalism. I had 7 boxes get delivered to my doorstep today. Like, it's granted, it was a birthday, but the point is, capitalism is destroyed. It's alive and well. It's raging. But then they mentioned that Biden is interfering in the automobile industry with these mandates for electric cars. And I wanted you to weigh in on that too, because of course the answer to that is the government has been subsidizing gas forever so that we can afford to buy gas and have these giant automobiles. Doesn't happen that way in Europe, as you know. What are your thoughts on those moments and those lies and completely missing the root of the problem, which you and I have certainly been discussing in the last few minutes?
Well, because it was all a fucking show, that was put on to benefit the people behind the scenes, the man behind the curtain, the Harlan Crows and the Koch brothers and the others who put up the money that allowed these little sort of puppets to go and maintain their positions of honor in society. And what do they have to do for it? They have to get on the stage and they have to say, no regulation, no taxes, don't save the environment, don't build electric cars. Do everything you can to ensure that the people who have millions and billions of dollars now can keep their millions and billions of dollars. And of course, they have to go and frame it in a variety of different ways. And so you have Donald Trump this week in a real, Donald Trump this week has said a lot of really crazy shit. And I think needs to be in a room with a article about it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he said was that windmills, which he always, thought were killing the birds, windmills are driving whales crazy. I don't know if you saw this comment, but and it was like, what? Windmills?
Well, that's a popular theory on the Jersey Shore.
Well, it's the windmills that make the whales beat.
Not among scientists, but that's very pervasive on the Jersey Shore because whales are dying, and they found a way to blame it on the windmills. But it's of course all the whale experts who care about the whales are like, it's not the windmills, it's climate, fuckface.
Yeah, of course. And also it's been going on for a long time. I saw a whale rider. They came up on the beach. The little girl got on top of the whale, rode them out. Everything was fine.
That's a good point.
And there were no windmills in Whale Rider, right?
Did you see Whale Rider? She had to avoid many windmills.
But he doesn't, anyway, he's crazy. But what's the point? The point of every one of these things, when you reduce it, and you get past the lies and you get past the bad presentation and you get past last night, the shouting on the shouting on the shouting, is that all of them are sitting there going, give more money to the rich guys, give more money to the rich guys. This is what it's all about. I could give more money to rich people than you could give more money to rich people. And, at the end of the day, That is exactly what the people who fund these things want them to say. And, they say it in ways that, it's like, well, this is really, good for you, because we won't be shipping jobs to China. And they ignore the fact that, internal combustion engines and fossil fuels have destroyed the planet, that they're going away, whether the government wants them to go away or they're not, doesn't want them to go away. And that all the big auto companies that they're complaining about have all committed to getting rid of these fossil fueled engines within the next few years.
Yes, several states have, and so have many countries. Norway is 80%. New cars.
Right. So, I mean, you could listen to this and you would say, well, these are terrible people. And they were. And by the way, the worst people in that debate were the fucking hand puppets who are the moderators.
Oh, they just say whatever you want. I said everything at last night's. I could probably speak 15 minutes of criticisms for all of them. The way they ask their questions, the questions they ask, the way they let it. I don't know what you want to say specifically.
No, because they started out and they go, well, let's start out with some facts. The economy sucks. Joe Biden is responsible for the economy sucking. All of you out there are paying too much, and there have been no good things that have happened in the economy. And by the way, the economy sucks. Well, Governor DeSantis, what do you think of our facts?
Well, they actually, I think, if I'm correct, I think they started out with the first question, and I believe went to Tim Scott, was, if you were president, would you fire the striking auto workers? And to his credit, he said the president can't fire private sector workers. She mentioned that because they were at the Reagan Library. She's like, Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. Would you fire the auto workers? And Tim Scott's like, you don't get to fire people.
Yeah, and so Tim Scott had a moment of reasonableness, which was then surpassed a few minutes later when he said LBJ's Great Society program was worse for black people than slavery. Now, yeah. I mean, let's take a moment and put that in the pantheon of insane shit that politicians say, because that was, so odious. Particularly coming from a black man in America. But it was surpassed every minute by Vivek Ramaswamy or DeSantis or Burgum, who obviously is an insane man who wandered onto the stage. Nobody knows who the fuck he is. And then periodically go, no, you're not talking to me. I'm a businessman. And we're like, dude, we've had a businessman as president.
Right.
He's currently facing 7 trials. He was a failure. Donald Trump should have put the knife through the heart of the idea that we need a businessman to run this country forever. But anyway.
Well, you have a piece, I think your most recent, at the Daily Beast, the title of which is Ask the GOP Debaters if they support Trump's open fascism. They didn't ask, and I know you're shocked, but this is a really important piece because you touched just a moment ago on it's been a hell of a week for Trump. One of the big things he did was he threatened major media outlets if he were to become president again. But I'm sure you can list them off. You wrote this really important piece. What is Donald Trump's fascism specifically from this week or any other time that they should have been asked about?
Well, I see the piece made a big impression on you because you don't remember any of it. But the reality is within this piece that I focused on a couple of things. One, the former president of the United States implied in one of his Truth Social meltdowns that former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, should be put to death because he was doing his job, essentially, honoring his oath.
He warned the Chinese that he said, I'll let you know if we're going to attack you.
But this is what Joint Chiefs chairmen do.
Seems treasonous.
Thank you, Donald. But this is what Joint Chiefs chairmen do. This is one of the ways that we avoid having wars, is we have communications even with our adversaries. And all he was doing was things that have done in the past. But Trump said, yeah, he should be put to death for that. And then within 24 hours, wrote another thing on Truth Social in which he said MSNBC, Comcast, NBC should be investigated. When I'm president, I will investigate them. They will have consequences for their fake news, which is essentially their attacks on me. Now, I do want to note that he said this about the network on which he appeared on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, in which she allowed him to roll on the floor put his paws in the air and scratched his belly. It was like, and just absolutely embarrassing interview where he was not really challenged on anything. And even that was not enough for this guy. And so he's going after it. But the main point is, when you say you're going to kill your opponents or you're going to put them in jail and you're going to end the First Amendment and you're only going to have people who are loyalists to you, you are, as I said in the article, turning the fascism up to 11, which is a movie reference. You probably, don't know what I'm talking about.
Was that a condescending remark?
Far too young.
It was a ageist remark.
Yeah, well, you just probably don't remember Spinal Tap.
Oh, it was condescending. Okay, yeah, I didn't remember. And you're right about me. I'm simple. I'm a simpleton. You're not wrong. Yeah, it's the other thing I wanted to ask you. Do
you really not watch Spinal Tap?
I interviewed a couple of those guys. Is Michael McKean one of them?
Yeah.
And I felt I'll never forget. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to prepare to interview this legend. I'm going to watch Spinal Tap tonight. And I watched some of it and I was like, okay, I get it. I get all that. I'm not, that highbrow humor misses me sometimes.
Highbrow humor. Okay.
He wasn't asked, by the way, last night. Anything else about the debate or how it should have gone?
No. Well, look, it was a clusterfuck, and they were peddling lies, and it was like the moderator would say, "Here's a lie," and then they would say, "Well, here's another lie," and then somebody else would say, "Well, I have a lie to go with your lies," and nobody challenged the lie. Nobody fact checked it. Nobody said, "Please don't continue with this line of argument because it's ridiculous, and what you're proposing would only lead to a worse situation." It was a food fight. And, by the way, it's exactly like the idiotic food fight that's going on in the United States Congress right now among the Republicans. This is going to lead to a government shutdown. 1 million people are going to be unemployed. Critical services aren't going to be provided. Military is not going to be funded. People on the border are not going to be funded. And if it plays out like every other shutdown, each of which was orchestrated by a Republican House, it's going to hurt them after it hurts all of us.
No doubt about it. And it'll be interesting to see who gets blamed. But what do you make of as Hakeem Jeffries calls it, civil war in the Republican caucus in the House? I mean, Republicans and Democrats overwhelmingly, 73 senators just passed continuing resolution out of the Senate, but the House is at each other's throats, of course.
Yeah, and what's more, look at the
House Republicans.
Look at the Republicans who are really driving this discussion, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who the other day proposed that the Secretary of Defense's salary had to be reduced to $1. Why? Because he's a big black guy, presumably, because, what other rationale could you have for that? Well,
he's the leader of the woke military.
The woke military. And then you have Matt Gaetz, who, is also, leading this, who's, probably a serial sex offender. And Paul Gosar is another one of the leading voices who actually also in his publicly funded newsletter to constituents also called for the death of General Mark Milley. This party is, engaged in a permanent battle between absolute fucking lunatics and spineless paramecia. I
was not ready for paramecia.
Well,
sounds accurate.
That's what you get, because that's Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy has no spine. Little amoeba floating around in the pond outside your house go, "There, but for the grace of God, go I."
More elitism when he says the pond outside your house. But it's more accurate that he just is no principles, right? He doesn't have any conservative beliefs. He doesn't have any beliefs. He's just trying to stay in power, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, just trying to stay in power no matter what the costs. And by the way, could he cut a deal with the Democrats? In 1 second. He
would lose his job, though.
But he would probably lose his job. But it would be the principled thing to do because, the United States government actually performs some useful services. But he doesn't want to do that. So he lets Donald Trump and he lets these others lead him around. At the end of the day, this is not going to work out for them. He is going to get kicked out. He is going to get replaced by, Elise Stefanik or somebody of that ilk. And it's going to get uglier.
I was told he would be replaced by a Russian flag waving in the wind.
It could well be. It could well be.
How do you want to just quickly react to the fact that when Zelensky was here, and you've been writing about what happened at the UN, really interesting stuff, the Daily Beast. When Zelensky was here, Kevin McCarthy said, we can't find time to invite you to address a joint session of Congress. And at least in the House, I got yelled at this on an MSNBC appearance. Stephanie Rules really looked at me like I was crazy to say that House Republicans are, quote, in the tank for Russia. I mean, well, they are. I mean, I'm not saying they're bought and paid for necessarily. I'm saying they definitely don't want to support the Ukrainians in the war. Thus, they're supporting Russia, and they certainly aren't speaking badly about him. What your thoughts on the Zelensky being here and Russia and the House Republicans not supporting the war?
Well, I mean,
Ukraine.
It's not all House Republicans, fortunately, and there's a sufficient number of them and a sufficient number of Senate Republicans that support for Ukraine will continue. But as you rightly observe, Kevin McCarthy is afraid of the right, the so-called Freedom Caucus, the MAGA part of his party. And that part of the party, they want out of funding for Ukraine. And you could see the split last night. Last night, I think Christie, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and I don't know, there was one other one, supported, Ukraine and saw it as, and Mike Pence saw it as some advantage. And the others were in this, we got to get out of there. We should be spending all this money on the border.
Well, it's either, what about the invasion on our southern border? Because we have migrants coming across our border and the Ukrainians have missiles.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a ridiculous line of reasoning, and this whole, immigrant thing, while there is an issue to be addressed there, as there has been for the past XD number of decades, is just racism, dog whistle racism in the Republican Party. But you're right. There is a substantial number of voices within the Republican Party who are threatening to defund our efforts in Ukraine. And in fact, one of the recent budget measures called for cutting back the funding for Ukraine. And that's a threat. And nobody should have challenged you on that, because that's just the reality. And if Stephanie Rule did that, I'll write her a nasty letter.
It's one thing to say that they weren't voting for funding, but let's be clear. They're also not saying, at best, they're not saying anything. At worst, they're supporting Vladimir Putin in so many ways. I mean, in my town, these Republicans, David, they are so in the tank for Putin and for, against Ukraine. So many of them. And what's wrong with Putin? And why are we giving money to Ukraine? I mean, it's a very popular theory that it's been pervasive, I think, amongst right-wingers that are paying attention to these things, because they're not making the arguments. Not only are they not sending money, they're not making the arguments. I just think it's really dangerous and terrible, because I think Putin's
It's disgusting. Putin has kidnapped hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian kids. He has killed hundreds of thousands of people. His soldiers have raped and murdered. They've done it in Ukraine just as they did it before in Chechnya, just as they did it before in Syria.
And for what?
And it's all to satisfy an ambition that is indefensible on any level.
He has sent 250,000 Russian men to their death for this.
Right. And destroyed half of his military. These people don't recognize the threat that is posed here, because if Putin gets his way in Ukraine, just as he got his way in Georgia, he will then look for the next place. And the next place is a NATO country. And if he goes into a NATO country, we are obligated by treaty to put American troops on the ground to fight back against Vladimir Putin. And these people should be thanking their lucky stars that the people of Ukraine have been willing to say, we will sacrifice, we will die, we will bleed, just give us a little support. We will turn the tide, and we will hit this guy so hard that he never does this again. And, it's, a tiny percentage of our defense budget has resulted in destroying half of the Russian military. That makes us all safer every single day. And it's just time to wake up, smell the coffee, acknowledge that this is one of those issues that should not be politicized. And also, I can't understand your town if there's a bunch of people who think that the world's worst war criminal is an okay guy.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, I've been posting things over and over trying to get the temperature of folks here. And it's kind of interesting. Just like I just quoted all of Trump's anti-American military, anti-veteran stuff. I just said, he has said this. How can you support Donald Trump and say you support the military? Because he hates him, and just, all of Goldberg's reporting and all of the things that we've even heard him say. And they say it's not happening. It didn't happen. So it's like, you put things out just to take the temperature and to see what defenses they'll come up with. But yeah, a lot of people have no problem with Putin. All right, let me ask you before I let you go to weigh in on now. I guess let me ask it this way. How much cash do you keep in your house? $650,000?
Do you count the gold bullion under the floorboards?
Okay, so how much cash and gold bullion, which apparently is under your floorboards, and you just told everybody where it was? I feel like that was probably not smart. Well,
isn't where you keep gold bullion is under your floorboards?
I actually don't think you have floorboards. I'm going to go ahead and say that you have some kind of marble tile or something.
Yeah. Yes, in my Roman villa. It's all complex mosaics with tiles flown in from Sicily. No.
How bad is this Menendez thing for Democrats?
I don't think it's bad for Democrats. It's Menendez, it's bad for Menendez. I think it's bad for the United States of America. I think, they've launched now a counterintelligence investigation related to this because it looks like Menendez did a number of things that gave the Egyptians information they shouldn't have had. I think, it is, further evidence of the sense of impunity many in the Senate have, many in Washington at a high level have. And, I think that's terrible. But, in the current environment, saying, oh, that's a corrupt Democrat is not likely to make a big difference because anybody who cares about the facts is going to know that the Republicans and Trump are the most corrupt party and administration in our history. And anybody who doesn't care about the facts already thinks that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are on the payroll from the Chinese. Which is just so much bullshit. But so this is just, muddies the water further. I think we should view it seriously. Menendez needs to resign, as 30 plus senators have said. They need to investigate this. And we really, really need to do some work on the over-empowerment of certain people in Washington, notably senators, who feel that they are just, but also Supreme Court justices and obviously an ex-president, who feel that they can just do whatever they want. And feather their nets at the expense of the American people.
Well said. Well, I'll see. He's not going anywhere, is he?
He says he's not going anywhere. He's going to get primaried. There are already a number of people who are considering running against him. He will lose in the primary. He's dead man walking, I think. But he seems to, be sort of in his own bubble and like defiant. And, partially this may be because the last time he was accused of corruption, it ended in a hung jury, and the Justice Department decided not to continue with the prosecution and have another trial. And so he thinks, well, I've gotten away with this once, I'll do it again. This, by the way, is the Trump story. It's the story of a lot of people in our two-tier justice system, in which the rich and powerful are able to skate on all their infractions or incur minor costs, while the poorest people in our society, go to jail for stealing a loaf of bread.
David Rothkopf, our conversation is now concluded, but you have been doing some great work over at your whole network, Deep State Radio Network, and I wanted to recommend people listen to your conversation with the great Heather Richardson about her new book, Democracy Awakening, but I thought maybe you would want to recommend something, because people, this is over now, and if maybe people aren't done listening to thoughtful, informative discussion, they want to head over to listen to something else. What would you recommend besides what I did?
Well, you're very kind, and I think we try to do what you try to do, which is we try to get experts in to talk at length about subjects. And the people, every week we have a spy show. The show does intelligence with Mark Polymeropoulos. We have a show that does defense and technology-related issues with John Wolfstall, who used to be the chief arms and nuclear guy in the Obama White House. We've got a show that deals with foreign policy and national security. We've got another one called Words Matter that deals with politics. We've got another DSR episode that deals with legal issues, and so on and so on. And we're adding to this. So we have a daily show, and we're just trying to provide deep dives into the various areas of policy that are important to people. We've got a big series going on now, which is quite interesting, a new episode dropping today on the climate crisis.
Love it.
Senator Ben Cardin is on that one. So we've got a lot going on.
The Road to COP28 podcast. I like that. DSR Network, thedsrnetwork.com for all and more, and head over there and listen to some more. David Rothkopf, everybody. We did it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, there he goes, David Rothkopf. We did it. We got it done. It's in the can. I got to go post this baby up. But thank you very much for listening to it, for being patient with me this weekend, whenever. I am a one-man machine in a shed, trying my best to get these great guests, prepare for them, to have thoughtful discussions so that we can all learn a lot from them on this journey that it seems like we're really on together. So many great friends out there listening, and I look so forward to meeting you and making more. I got to get up to New Hampshire. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout, which is going to be at 9 p.m. unless you hear earlier from me. But look for that. If you're a subscriber, you'll get an email. If you're not, patreon.com/Pete Dominick. You don't know what you're missing from this amazing community on Thursday nights. Always looking for ways to make the Hangouts better, much less the show better. So email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. And one of our favorites, who's often there, John Carroll, sings us in, sings us out. Take it away, John.
Stand up, you gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.